was early my best companion at home when I wanted to steer clear of grown-up interests. For example, both of us were collectors of little stuffed animals that we handled to joust against one another. When the family spent a year in Holland, we became large chocolate capital letters initiating our names. She felt blessed above me because her capital B chocolate outweighed my capital P chocolate. When we returned to California, the two of us not infrequently would play card games or board games together. As we advanced through school, we developed circles of same-age friends that became increasingly separate. And when I began my third year of high school, I added immersed in. Barbara had planned to initiate French, but because that path carried the risk of our being assigned to the same French 1 class, she switched and decided to take German instead. After she had entered and advanced at Stanford, Barbara proceeded to spend several months living in Germany, which in Barbara had a definite tendency to be an independent thinker and was quick to express approval of those who also liked to think independently, while feeling cool to those who she felt were unduly bound to tradition or marrying in blue wedding dress for herself instead of wearing a traditional white dress. After settling in as a wife, she embarked on a career change and enrolled as a dentistry student at Tufts University, subsequently practicing dentistry in Seattle and Oakland, relocating her office to flow along with change in the family's residence. Barbara developed into a marvelous hostess, and as time marched on, she put together several lavish birthday parties for her mother. It is well known in the medical field that consistent exercise tends to bring health benefits. So, Barbara was putting in more exercise time as an instructor than pursuing the treasures of Jesus Christ more than the average good citizen. Being confident to reconnect with Barbara is good.
When I think of Barbara, the first word that comes to mind is friend. I don't know anyone who had more friends and was more loved by her friends than Barbara. She had more people who thought of her as their best friend. Of those friendships is evident by the gathering here today. Barbara likewise treasured her called them, she visited them, she remembered their birthdays, and she genuinely cared. I remember thinking, Barbara really works at being a good friend. However, as I reflected, she truly loved those friends, and what she did was simply Barbara being Barbara. I'm honored that Cam asked me to speak today. In preparing my comments, I was able to speak to some of you who knew her for well over 55 years. To a person, everyone agreed that friend is what best characterizes Barbara. I knew Barbara going back to Stanford days, where we were both in the class of 1971. One of Barbara's great friends from our class is Ann Santa, who's here today. And Ann, would you please stand up so we can see who you are? Wonderful. Ann was living off campus with Kathy March, who was one of Barbara's freshman roommates. Despite never having met Ann, Barbara moved in. They set up bunk beds and made a long desk out of doors and cinder blocks. They used desk chairs as ladders for access to tip over at the same time. It was Barbara's acquaintance with familiar with Lambda Nu. It was a co-ed fraternity on Lake Lagunita, where Ann, John Santa, my future wife Carolyn, and I, and others who are here today, or who are watching remotely, lived in what we all regarded as a unique and memorable environment. Barb loved the Lambda Nu trip together to celebrate and relive our times at Stanford. Ann was a popular young woman who attracted young men to come. And John Santa was the one for her. Rather good advice, I must say. And accompanying Ann today is her husband, John Santa. Barb and John's regard for each other lasted the rest of Barbara's life, right up to the last day. With the challenges of her cancer. While he did this as a doctor, it was mostly as a friend who loved Barbara. I know that John greatly admired how Barbara understood her body so well and how she managed diabetes and later her cancer. Charm's another word that comes to mind in thinking about Barbara. My wife, Carolyn, and I often dined out with Barbara and Cam. Because of her diabetes, Barb couldn't eat the starches so often included in the meals. So what if the menu said, please, no substitutions? Barbara never once failed to get that second serving of veggies by charming the waiter. Extra fun if the chef made her zucchini into zoodles so she could feel like she was often celebrating big birthdays. Chez Panisse, Farallon, and a birthday dinner for Barbara at a rooftop restaurant overlooking Lake Como. And speaking of birthdays, I always thought it was kind of cool that Barbara's birthday, June 25, is exactly 1/2 year from Christmas. Radiance is another word for Barbara. She glowed as she went through the vigorous exercises, jumping up and down. On a personal note, after Stanford, Barbara and I, unbeknownst to each other, enrolled in the School of Education at UC Berkeley. When we showed up on the first day, we had one of those, what are you doing here moments. She went on to become a German teacher, but I became a lawyer. In addition to being a teacher, Barbara was a learner too. She felt the pull of science, which she missed out on as an undergrad. Like many, I was surprised to learn that she reinvented herself as a dentist. Pretty impressive. One of Barbara's roommates, freshman roommates, Bev Simmons, is here today. It won't surprise you to learn that it was Barbara who arranged the 60th reunion in Pasadena of their Branner Hall trio. Whenever the three of them got together, they picked up right where they left off. Isn't it great to have friends like that? One summer, Bev went to Colorado to take some classes. Barbara, not having any other plans, came along and they roomed together. The other day, Bev told me something about Barbara I had never known. To keep herself busy, felt guilty about selling them to families who personality and charm. Barbara had a conscience too. Also, while in Colorado, Barbara became an accomplished photographer. She had a favorite subject. What was it? Cows. Yes, it was cows. For those of you who've been lucky enough to visit them, you know that Barbara and Cam's house is filled with wonderful and sometimes whimsical cow art in various forms. Now this involves being pulled into the air with a parachute and being pulled into the air behind a boat. And yikes, they jumped 55 stories off the Sky Tower in New Zealand, in Auckland, New Zealand. Among the many reasons Bev loved Barbara so much is that Barbara inspired her to do things she thought were never positions to fill. And we all had a terrific reunion. In 2022, the country celebrated the 50th anniversary of Title IX. Barbara was thrilled to hear from the Stanford Athletic Department that she'd been awarded a Block S letter in women's tennis. She got one in bowling, too. By the way, our beloved bowling alley in Stanford Student Union is now some kind of computer center. Where did Stanford's values go? They didn't give out letters in table tennis, but I can tell you that the few times I played ping pong with Barbara, she cleaned my clock. One of Barbara's greatest gifts to all of us was bringing us Cam. Carolyn and I first met Cam at their wedding. My initial thought was, wow, this guy really hit the jackpot, which of course was true. Radiated happiness. It was so wonderful that each of them felt that they were the lucky one. Carolyn and I will stay close to Cam and expect to see him often here in Nipomo. We'll continue to take trips together, and his spot in the Lambda Nu group is solid. As I wrap up, I want to thank Anne, John, Bev, Carolyn, and others for helping me collect my thoughts and share some of them with you this morning.